Yo, hello everybody. What's up? It's me, Pixl. Welcome in, guys. Today we are going to be doing a first impressions review of the new book by MCDM. Their monster manual called Flea Mortals, the MCDM monster book. Just came
Such a
out
good
this
name.
week. Yeah, very cool. Just came out this week. And so I haven't looked at every single stat block in here, but I've glanced over pretty much all of them and gone in depth on like the first quarter of them or so. Um, and yeah, super excited to be talking about this book. Um, so I guess we'll kind of jump right into it. What we're kind of gonna do is give like big level top line first impressions, like across the board stuff. We're gonna
Mm.
look specifically at a couple of different like types of monsters that we each looked at. Also, everybody, welcome Beast. You know Beast from our AOA streams. Um,
Hi, I'm Beast.
and he basically what we did, we kind of split the book. I started at A and started working in. He started at the end and started working back. And then we've kind of bounced around, just looking at different stuff and having a bit of a chat beforehand. So, also everybody in chat, I do see you, and thank you guys so much for being here. We're gonna try to respond a little bit to chat if you guys have things to say, like about what you're seeing in the book and things like that. We are gonna be putting this on YouTube as well. So I am gonna also kind of be trying to keep the discussion focused on what we're talking about. So let's jump right in. Um, so I'm
So I gotta say, definitely, if you're checking out this PDF, don't start at the back. That was maybe a bad way to do that.
yeah.
It's given me a really interesting, I think because of how I did that, what I'm going to talk about is going to be more focused on the back end, which I think works out. But um, this book is organized really, really well. And
Mm-hmm.
I think regardless of how you approach it, if you start at the beginning, you are going to get whatever you want out of this.
Yeah. So let's talk about top line takeaways. The number one thing that I like, the first thing I want to say, basically, is that there is not a single monster stat block in this book that I think Wizards of the Coast did a better job if they both did the same. The goal of this book was better monsters for 5th edition D&D. It's like right in the foreword. This is what they're trying to do. And they really are kind of trying to do like an alternative to the monster manual. I have a number of different, expansion type books, right? Like the Kobold Press stuff is really, really good. I have the Tome of Beasts, and I've looked through a bunch of the other ones, and they're great. Like I love their stuff. The art is good, but they are expansions, right? Like they're largely like they're treading some new ground, but they're largely in the same design space of like what 5e is already doing. And MCDM
Hmm.
basically said, okay, what are the things we kind of have issues with in 5th
This
edition?
isn't working.
Yeah, so like what do we not like about running monsters in 5th edition, and what can we do about it? And so I think coming from that, like they do a lot of the same stuff, right? They do like bugbears, demons, devils, dragons, elementals, giants, goblins, like a lot of stuff that is already in the 5e like monster manual or Volo's Guide to Monsters and that kind of stuff. They are retreading that same ground. So that's why my top line takeaway is Flea Mortals did it better, basically on every single monster that I've looked at. Um, Other top line
I do
takeaways? Go
not
ahead.
like monster manuals. I love monster manuals. They're fantastic. But I personally, when I like to run my games at my table, I don't like using monsters from monster manuals. And I want to use some of these monsters. Uh they are designed in a way. The reason I tend to shy away from the stuff that is, put out as standard edition is because I feel like a lot of the monsters tend to be designed independently in a vacuum, right? And what this book does is cluster monsters together that are interdependent on one another, that actually have interactions with one another during fights, and that makes them realistic to me.
Yeah.
It helps with the buy-in of taking a narrative and taking a combat encounter and making the magic happen, right? Which
Right.
is trying to get those two things to line up.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit before stream, which is so one of the things that they've done, I think, a really great job with is to kind of bring back some high level design ideas from 4th edition. So the idea of monsters having like a role, like this is an ambusher and this is a brute and this is a soldier and this is a leader type thing. Which is something that in 4th edition everyone hated on the player side, right? They were like, oh, well, they're turning it into like an MMO and you have strikers or DPS and, you know, these are the tanks and these are the controller, blah, 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 right? And people hated that on the player side, but in responding to that with 5th edition, right, WotC threw the whole thing out, right? Because monsters had it too, basically, right? And it was really helpful because they would give you, okay, here's a striker goblin, and here's a healer, here's, you know, all the different roles, but on goblins and orcs and hobgoblins and whatever, right? Would have different, like, okay.
That interdependency.
Yeah. And one of the things that it kind of helped you do was the monsters were designed, like the 5th edition goblins, like they're all just the same. Right, so coming out of the monster manual, it's like, all right, they have nimble escape, they have nimble escape, they have like a short bow, they have a scimitar, they have 7 hit points, and same armor class, maybe. 15 armor class, and that's all they are. And then maybe you've got a higher level, there's a boss one in here or something like that, right? But what this is doing is like, yeah, you can have like a party of goblins where the different goblins have different roles in the combat, you know? There's like one goblin who is the big guy who's going to go up front and be a big threat. And meanwhile, people are going to like pelt you from behind. It's like they did, you know. And so tactically, that's super useful for DMs where you don't have to kludge that together from, you know, your own homebrew shit.
I think it's beneficial to players too, because if you can identify based on either the behavior or the presentation of a group of enemies, what each of them is probably going to be good or bad at, or just thinking like, you know, ahead when you're trying to set up combos, like how are they going to act?
Yeah.
If that guy's, you know, twice as tall as every other guy and he's screaming bloody murder, he's probably coming right at you.
Yeah.
So you can plan for that.
Right.
And that's another one of my rants that that I'll cut off right here. Sure. Is that as a player, you should be thinking as a group when in a combat encounter. And a lot of people have a hard time with that because there's a lot of rules, but that's it. I have a big gripe about that.
Yeah. So the roles, super helpful on the monster side, right? Take it or leave it on the player side. I'm not really interested in having an edition war discussion, but on the monster side, I think it was brilliant of them to bring back action-oriented creatures. If you guys know the action-oriented monster video from MCDM, from Matt Colville's YouTube channel, and then running the game series, a lot of monsters are designed with
philosophy.
That. Yeah, and I think it works really well. It's designed to make a combat have a narrative flow to it, and to give you some like big cinematic moments in a combat of the villain doing cool stuff. Which is great and works.
It gives you
great.
a roadmap, right?
And
for your combat encounters to have a narrative swell.
Exactly.
Which
and a lot of times what you see is like the first one has to do with like buffing themselves or bringing in allies or debuffing the party. The second one is often like a positional tactical one, and the third one is often kind of like an ultimate like limit break type thing. You know what I mean? Where they're like, "Oh, I'm fucked. We're gonna do the crazy thing."
They call them, or they nickname them alts. Right?
Yeah, I think it's like from what is that Overwatch type thing? You know, which is the idea. Limit break, I think, also works in my view.
I like limit break
because my dragon is using his limit break. Is an amazing sentence. So that stuff works really well. They have a lot of rules in here for like companions and retainers, which is some MCDM design that I haven't engaged with very much and don't necessarily intend to. So I'm mostly overlooking that stuff.
And minions, the minion rule.
Minions are great. Super love the design on that.
Yeah.
And then the feedback that they say they've gotten from playtesters, and I haven't used a lot of these monsters. I think I've used the goblins from the like playtest packets to run the Tomb of the Delian Order in one shots a bunch of times, and I liked those. I liked running those a lot. But what they're largely saying is like their creatures by CR and encounter building is a bit easier to use than the WotC stuff that you get. It's like if you're building like what's supposed to be a deadly encounter using these monsters, it really will be very deadly. Versus like in the WotC stuff, a lot of times if you build a hard encounter for a party, it's going to be a cakewalk. And if you build a deadly encounter for a party, then maybe somebody goes down. So all of that having been said, those are kind of the top line takeaways. The final top line takeaway I have is the art is fantastic. All of the art in this book is so good. Truly incredible just to look at.
I have a note about that too. One of the things I noticed going through the book was immediately how great the art was. And then the next thing I noticed was that some things didn't have art, and I was disappointed by that.
Yeah.
And there's one specifically that I'll talk about later when we get to the nitty-gritty of this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing too. But I will say, like, 80% of the stat blocks, I feel like, I haven't done the math on this, but like 80% or more of the stat blocks have some art associated with them, I think.
I'd say like 60%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's a lot in there. Yeah, I definitely am not, there are a couple things that I was disappointed didn't have art. There was one of the devils that didn't have art that I was like, oh, I wanted that to have some art. But I think I found it later in the retainer section that I think was similar. But okay. So, that's kind of our top line takeaways. I will say I have noticed like a couple of typos and things like that. Not a ton, but just like a little bit of stuff here and there. Like two things I can think of off the top of my head, but it's a big book. These kinds of things happen.
This is like a 400-page book.
Yeah. And they don't have the kind of budgie that Wizards has to like proofread it as many times. So, okay, so why don't we go like 1-2 punch? Also, guys, when we get to, we're going to kind of go in detail into some monsters now, I think, that we kind of picked out as like particularly good, interesting things. If you guys have anything you want us to talk about in chat, if you like, hey, show me the hobgoblins or the giants or whatever that we aren't talking about, we'll try and keep that on our mind. But I want to start with the demons, I think, is going to be my first stop. So the honestly, demons.
This book is like the Louvre. Like it would take days for us to actually give everything attention.
Right. So we kind of have picked out a couple of blocks to look at. So the demons, they've introduced this really interesting mechanic that I super enjoy, which is this idea of the demons like eating souls to get more powerful. It's very like FromSoft Dark Souls kind of like in a way. And so as the demons go up in level, they have abilities that they can spend, souls on. So like this Ruinant, for instance, on page 59, has 2 abilities that cost it souls. It starts the battle with 2 souls to begin with and can get more. Oh, you could roll a d4 if you wanted. Can get more souls if it kills stuff and eats its soul, right? So it's got Salt Wounds. The Ruinant chooses up to 3 creatures they can see within 60 feet who don't have all their hit points. Each target must make a DC 15 con save or take 3d10 necrotic damage on a fail save or half as much on a successful one. Salt Wounds. Like, that's really cool that they're like, if I've hurt you, I'm going to hurt you more, right? But it costs me a soul to do this. This is like a big, cool ability that I'm spending some of my essence to do. And then Corrupt Healing costs a soul. When a creature within 60 feet regains hit points, a spell or from a power spell or similar supernatural effect, the Ruinant corrupts the effect. The target regains no hit points, and the target and each of the Ruinant's enemy within 5 feet of the Ruinant must succeed a DC 15 con save or take necrotic damage equal to half the number of hit points the effect would have restored. So it's like blocking the healing.
I love that.
And it's super evocative and interesting. I would love narrating that.
That's
shit.
Another thing.
Somebody's going to drop a mass healing word, and I'm going to be like, "Fuck you!"
Because like this is ultimately just like a charge or a token based ability, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh, the souls are just coins that you spend to do things, but making them souls gives you as a GM, DM, the actual narrative potential, like you know what to say, like you know how to flavor that
Yeah,
because it's a soul.
100%.
And there's a lot of instances of designing creatures like that with token based abilities, and the choice of token makes the
Yeah.
monster interesting.
Yeah, and like with that too, you can also imagine like drop one of these things in a spot with some weak NPCs, and all of a sudden, this thing is not only like eating a bunch of people, but it might get bigger and nastier when it does it, right?
Right.
It might just turn into another bigger, worse demon, which would
There's
be cool as hell.
the
So,
other monster that I remember that had an interesting token was some sort of skull collector creature,
mhm,
and it spent skulls in order it the skulls essentially were material components that it used to channel magic, and it would destroy these skulls or collections of skulls to do it. Uh, and it has specific rules for how it can use the skulls of either dead things in the area or uh, things that it kills in the encounter.
right.
And that's
Um,
just great.
yeah, and that's another thing I also want to say too. Another top line takeaway that I kind of forgot earlier is um, my take on this is that these monsters are just largely more complicated than standard 5th edition monsters. There's more stuff to remember.
Right.
There's more reactions, there's more bonus actions, there's more, like almost every monster has some kind of feature or trait. And then anything above like CR1 has usually either a reaction or a bonus action or some extra action it can take that's like something, right? Which is great, but if you're someone who's like overwhelmed already by 5th edition monster design, that is not going to get better in this book. The only way I will say I think it does get a little better is the way they approach magic. There was a
right.
what was I looking at? It was a goblin, maybe. There was a creature I was looking at where, like, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll just give a creature a couple of actions that are magical attacks. So it's not like, oh, this creature can cast Fireball and you got to remember what Fireball does, or this creature can cast Toxic Cloud and you got to remember what Toxic Cloud does. They'll just give it an ability where let's see, maybe the orcs have one if I can find one. Actually, you know what? I just got to look for utility spells.
There's also a couple of instances where the stat blocks have like a utility spell section.
Yes, that's what I'm about to talk about. Yeah.
So like the tree ants have that for
the
instance.
sea hags or the hags have it too. Yeah, where it's like what it'll do, it'll go, okay, here's a night hag. Here's the actions it can take. It can cast Viscous Visions, which is a 6th level spell we invented for this hag. It makes a dream cone, people succeed, or they're charmed, or they take damage, or whatever. And it might have a couple of different magical attacks. And then it just says utility spells, and almost all the utility spells are not stuff they're going to do in combat as, like, you know, alter self,
as an
magic,
action.
pass without trace, legend lore,
Speak with animals, stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's like utility stuff. But all of the, like, I'm running this in combat stuff is on the car, on the block. You know what I mean? Which I think is the intent.
And it's
I don't have to go to the player's handbook and look up
action.
You know, yeah. I don't have to go to the player's handbook and look up.
It's not like listed as
Toxic Cloud. Yeah. So
right.
Okay, so I talked about demons and what I liked about those, which was the soul count thing. I thought that was super cool. Also, the art. Where's this guy? Their archdemon Arumvis is this absolutely bonkers, like, greed demon thing. Its abilities are insane, and it's cool as hell. And I just want to show the art for that because it's like this, like, snake man with souls in his, like, guts. Like, look at that. So fucking rad. Anyway, so let's go to you. What's one of your stat blocks you wanted to talk about?
So there was one called the Rot Angel, and it's towards the back. It might even be in the layers.
Okay, is it the Rot Beast or the Rot Angel?
It's Rot Angel. It almost looks like the artwork is so crazy. It's like a floating it's like half mushroom, half jellyfish
type
deal.
Yeah, it's in the swamp. It's on
I'm
235. Okay.
235,
Yeah. Well, no, 335. Sorry, and it's actually 342
335.
of the
Okay,
PDF if you want to, because there's
342.
always a
All
couple
right, let me
extra
see if I
unnumbered
can
things.
get there. So I skimmed this briefly, and I thought that the design of the monster itself was really great. It Oh my gosh, I still got like 20 pages
You
to
can just,
go.
well,
No, I know. I'm like trying to jump.
yeah.
All right.
I wanted to zoom in on the art. It's like this mushroom with eyeballs and teeth and tentacles and shit.
Yeah, it's so creepy. And it's in the back section of the book, um which page of the PDF was it? Oh my gosh.
342 of the PDF.
342, yeah. It's struggling to load.
Rip.
All right, here we go. Rod Angel. Right. So you have this mushroom jellyfish floating demon type thing. I love that it's called an angel. I love that. I love that it's, you're playing with a little bit of this life death dichotomy
Well,
thing,
and it's
that
not
that
just called an angel.
fungus.
It is a celestial.
It is a celestial.
I just
So
noticed that. Holy shit.
it's so cool. All right, so let's just take this from top to bottom. Rot Angel, it's a medium celestial, typically lawful neutral. Uh, it's AC 15, nothing crazy, 90 hit points. It can fly 50 feet. It's fast. And it
Yeah.
has this ability called flyby, in which it does not provoke opportunity attacks
Yeah.
while
And a
zipping
lot
around.
of the, not to derail, but a lot of there's like birds of prey. There's like an animal section that we actually should talk about at some point, because they gave us like a bunch of options, which I think work really well for keeping the page count of the book down. But for me, putting things into Roll20 was a nightmare. But we'll talk about that later. But a lot of those had flyby too. I want to say that actually is something that you see in 5e a little bit too, with certain flying creatures.
It
but
may be a typical ability.
yeah. But that being
other
said,
monsters say.
it's cool as shit. Sorry, go ahead.
It gives you a lot of options, right? As a DM, you don't have to worry about your players like forming some sort of weird corridor where you're trying to escape for whatever reason and it just dies. So it's very simple. It only has three things on the or three actions. As an action, a bonus action, and a reaction. And I love that it has a very wide but very simple to decide what to do set of actions. Right? Action is probably going to take this every single turn. Bonus action, also probably every turn. Unless it was stunned or something, but it's not immune to being stunned or incapacitated. So,
Or
and it has
like
a reaction
or something, right?
which it's going to do every single turn if you're attacking it, right?
Yeah.
So let's describe the abilities because they all really play into one another. And I love this sort of like combo style design for creatures. So decaying touch, melee attack, it's necrotic damage. If it's attacking a corpse or an undead target, the damage increases. So this thing wants to get rid of dead stuff. For the next 24 hours, the target is marked for death, and a creature who drops to 0 hit points while marked for death immediately fails their first death save or a death save.
No. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Yeah. Immediately fails a death save.
So
sorry, I thought it said dies if they fail one death save, but it doesn't. That's wrong.
That would be harsh. But like this thing wants you dead, and it wants the dead to go away, which I love. You already have this like behavioral decision making understanding of the creature. Hypnotic beam is the bonus action. One of the angel's eyes shoots a magic ray at a creature it can see within 60 feet of them. For DC 14 wisdom save, or they have to use their reaction if available to move as far as their speed allows towards the angel, avoiding obviously dangerous ground. So not only is it zipping around, right, flying 50 feet every round, that's a crazy amount of distance to cover. it's tip tapping everyone until it knocks you down and then puts you in a really dangerous spot with you have to, you're what, 50% more likely to die because of that first death save.
Right.
And then if you try to stay away from it so it can't get to you, it's going to try to pull you in close enough to where it can tap on you. And then if you hit it, it uses reaction. When the angels hit with an attack, they release a cloud of spores. Creatures within 10 feet have to see DC 14 con save, or they're blinded. And blinded makes it impossible to hit this thing because you're attacking with disadvantage.
Right.
So it already isn't taking opportunity attacks. It's only going to make itself harder to hit by blinding you because you hit it. So if you're able to hit it, it's trying to like make you less of a threat. And I love that.
And if you're like a really ranged character, let's say the ranger is more than 60 feet away from the thing, pelting it with arrows, right? First of all, it's probably going to move towards the ranger to get them in its stuff. But anyone who is in melee with the thing, or anyone who's been charmed and hypnotic beamed, is going to be blinded anyway. So it's like, if you're trying to
doing
do
the damage or putting you in danger.
Crazy.
It's a great design, and this is the kind of monster that, yes, you have to read through the stat block a couple of times and mentally tell yourself like cause and effect. How does this creature work? Right. But if you had 2 of these, it would be a crazy fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that's cool, so this is in a section of the book where they have a bunch of different environments and some stat blocks specific to what you might find there. And it has a whole, this is going to be on page 340 of the PDF Beast, but there's a whole section on what the Rot Angel is and does outside of the stat block at the beginning of the thing to kind of get a sense of what it does. So standing 5 to 6 feet tall, floating black and brown mushrooms move about the swamp like jellyfish. There are 13 prehensile eye stalks dangling beneath their cap. These Rot Angels are in fact celestials, typically serving gods of death in their search for the recently deceased. The touch of their stalk-like proboscises causes rapid decay in organic matter. Death's cleanup crew. Death gods send Rot Angels to remove all traces of a corpse from the world after that person's soul has been taken. A corpse decomposed by the touch of a Rot Angel can't be returned to life, made undead, or otherwise supernaturally affected. Ooh,
nice.
Brutal. The gods rarely explain why a given corpse requires a Rot Angel, and these angels don't ask. Dedicated servants. Once a Rot Angel has been dispatched to a corpse, nothing short of death can dissuade them from completing their assignment. Should a Rot Angel be interrupted in their work, they have free reign to deal with the interruption in whatever way is required, up to and including the destruction of the disrupting forces. So that's pretty wild. They're lawful neutral. They serve death gods. It sounds like they're often given missions to get rid of specific corpses, which is like a whole other level of interesting, right? It's like, we got to resurrect this important like NPC, and then one of these guys shows up, Yeah.
See, to me, this feels like a really interesting narrative void of like, you have a revenant, which is someone who basically is like so angry that they won't die until they complete a mission. They literally come back from death to do something so they can go die again. And this would be like perfect antithesis to that. It's like, you came back, you're not allowed to be back. You got to go, and your corpse is going to rot away so that you can't come back to anything. We're literally deleting you from the material plane.
and then also sometimes they just live in swamps for some reason. That's like, it's okay. But yeah, that is a pretty good one. I hadn't seen that one before. Okay.
There is another monster literally on the page before it, 334, page 341 of the PDF.
Yeah.
The Marsh Hydra. So remember my comment about how I was disappointed that there wasn't art for certain creatures? This is one of them. I saw Marsh Hydra and I thought, okay, Hydra, I know what a Hydra looks like. What is a Marsh Hydra? How is it distinct? Show me. I want to see this cool thing. And so I was disappointed. I kind of scrolled up and down, didn't see anything, and thought to myself, well, I'll read through the stat block to get a better understanding. Maybe I can imagine what a Marsh Hydra is. And I read through the whole thing and I was like, I have some questions still. And in the bottom left corner of that
This little
page,
guy right here.
there's just a tiny little footnote called Big Ball of Snakes, and I want to read it out loud because it tickled me to nonstop. This is a note from the design team. Big Ball of Snakes. Before there was the Marsh Hydra, there was the Big Ball of Snakes. When we first started working on the swamp environment, we created a creature that was just an enormous swarm of different snakes, all tangled together as one, in an enormous ball rolling through the swamp looking for a meal. This stat block was simply called the Big Ball of Snakes. We had a lot of laughs about the idea, but ultimately decided the Big Ball of Snakes was just too silly for this particular book. The design team still really liked the stat block's mechanics, so we changed the lore, adjusted some language, and voila, the Marsh Hydra was
Incredible.
born.
They
I just
basically
want to
made
say,
a rat king out of snakes.
bravo, bravo for not giving up on that which brings you joy. If making this stat block brought you that much joy, I'm so happy that you kept it in here, that you found a way to preserve its integrity within the book. And thank you, because I read this from bottom to top, from back to front. I caught this in like the first little bit, and
Nice.
it set me up for a really great read. So
Yeah. Okay, the next thing I want to jump to is dragons. So, this book took a really interesting approach to dragons. Instead of giving us like, wormling, young dragon, adult dragon, ancient dragon, they just gave us 5 chromatic ancient dragons. But what they did with them that I think is really, really good is they gave them all names. They made them all high level, like solo boss monsters, like big campaign ending guys or ladies. And they like gave them all personalities and like purposes, right? Like there's one of them, I think it's the blue one, is not even an evil dragon. It's called Xantakorajek. And this thing is a storm dragon known as the Voice of the Ages, or Xantakorajek. It's the Master of Thunder and Lightning, but it also like has insane. It's like got a plus 20 to history or something. It like knows all this shit. It's like, so it's really more interesting than, oh, this is just some like big blue dragon. You know what I mean? So they did that with all of these. I will say one of the typos I've noticed, and if anyone knows how to contact MCDM about this, they have made a slight mistake in the pronunciation guide, I think, for the fire dragon. They've spelled it Forzentiralis, but they've done the they've flipped the L and the R in the pronunciation to make it Forzentillaris. So it's a little odd. I don't know if that was intentional or not. But anyway, but they've given them all lore and like things that they want. Do what? Yeah, it's the fire one. If you look at, I think it's page 81 of the PDF, it'll be page 74 of the book. The name is spelled Forzantirils, but then if you look at the like pronunciation guide, which I'm glad they did pronunciation guides for some of these because these names are insane.
Yes, thank you.
But it spells it Forzantil with the L till iris instead of Tirilis. And the L and the R sounds are pretty similar, so I don't think it's like a huge deal. But anyway, but let's talk about these guys. One of the things a couple of things. There's a sidebar here in Dragons, and this exists in a number of the like precursors to the stat block. So like sometimes you'll get a section on, oh, these are all the bugbears, these are all the goblins, these are all the gnolls, whatever. And sometimes there will be a sidebar on their tactics. So this is dragon tactics, which is nice. Yeah. And it's give the DM a little bit of guidance on like, how do you actually use this thing? In addition to just what's on the block. Again, the art for these guys is insane. This is Durixavenix, I think. Is that? Let me look at this. Durizavenix. Okay, Durizavenix. This is the ice dragon. One of the things I think is really cool. They did is they have given a lot of these guys damage immunities, not just to like their main cold damage, but to another damage type. So this guy's immune to cold and force damage. They've given him several condition immunities: charmed, dazed, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, stunned. Also, they've added a dazed condition. We'll talk about that maybe later. Blind sight, true sight, insane stuff. But one of the things I think is really cool that they've done with these guys is they've tried to fix legendary resistance. So in 5th edition, legendary resistance is a thing that like high level bad guys have, so that it's so that your boss monster doesn't get shut down in the first round by a single spell.
Yeah.
You know,
so it doesn't go out like a punk.
Yeah, exactly. Your arch necromancer doesn't get hit with a hold person and then just fail his save a bunch of times, and then everyone beats him to death, and the climactic boss fight of your campaign is just over, right? There are some groups that would love that, and there are some groups that would absolutely hate it. So Legendary Resistance is an attempt to give them the ability to shrug off the effects of stuff that would ruin everybody's fun, kind of, you know? So that, anyway. But it's annoying because it's like, okay, if you know something has legendary resistances, you have to like try to bait them into using it on spells that like are bad for them, but not your biggest, heaviest, nastiest spells. Because if you blow all your biggest, heaviest, nastiest spells while they still have resistance, they're just going to shake it off, you know? So what I like that they've done to try to fix that problem of, because it's not fun, right? If it's like, oh, okay, he failed this save. Well, he chooses to succeed instead, so F you. You know what I mean? Like, that's how 5th edition is currently designed, and it's just not fun. It's like, it's just it's like, oh, well, I wasted my 7th level spell slot on him just saying, screw you, you know.
Right, cool. And it's just like an instant, all right, and you don't do that, and we move on. Right? And it's kind of a dead fish flop.
And then the narrative of it sucks, too. It's like, okay, he just shrugs it off and goes on, you know. So what they've done is they've tried to add in penalties. So any creature that has some kind of like legendary resistance. Yeah. Any creature that has some kind of legendary resistance, when it takes that legendary resistance and uses it.
Takes a debuff too.
It takes some kind of a penalty or a debuff or whatever. So there is a Phoenix, the ice dragon, can't take disengage actions until the end of his next turn. So it's like if he uses this and you're up on him, he can't just disengage and fly away. You will get your opportunity attacks on him. Right? Which, if you think about a dragon, if he's in a big room and he's flying around and he's like swooping in and then he lands and he does some attacks and now he can't disengage, he's going to have to take those, attack actions. The one that I think I liked the most of, two of them I liked better than the others. The red dragon for Zentirolus, when it takes its Ireful Defense, which is its legendary resistance, it succeeds the roll instead, but then attacks against her have advantage until the end of the next turn. You know, basically pulling from like the barbarian's like reckless attack kind of thing, except turning that kind of into a legendary resistance. Really cool. I love that. And I feel like I could imagine several different ways of narrating that. Maybe she has to like burn hotter than normal and it weakens her outer scales because they're, or something. Or maybe she like just, is like less mobile because of the heat or something. It's like harder, I can come up with several ways to narrate that I think are evocative and cool. And then the shadow dragon Kazildrath.
Yeah. I was just reading that.
I love this one because
shadow.
Yeah, it has a bunch of abilities where it like puts shadow on the ground. It's vacuous breath puts shadow, I think, on the ground. Magical darkness.
Bonus action and shroud.
Yep, bonus action and shroud. Sinking gloom, I think, does too, maybe. Several of its abilities put areas of magical darkness on the playing field, and then in order to use its legendary resistance, it has to like reabsorb all the shadow that it spit out to protect itself. That's so cool and evocative, and then it's dramatically
not
changes.
Allowed to use certain abilities after that also
until the end of their next turn. Yeah. So it's like it has to suck up its darkness and hold on to it. It's just so cool. And then the one I will say that I was a little underwhelmed by in this block was Easterthrax. Now, Easterthrax overall is kind of like a Cthulhu acid dragon. It's bonkers. The art for this is insane. It's covered in glowing green eyes. This thing is wild. And most of the stat block is amazing. It has this like corruption mechanic where if you deal poison damage to something, it becomes corrupted until it like it gets healed by lesser restoration or something. But if it dies while corrupted, it melts into a gibbering mouther.
I love that.
Straight up. But which is an amazing evocative ability, and I absolutely love it. And then its villain actions are really cool. It's like summoning monoliths of massive green crystal,
Eldritch crystal,
makes stuff weak to psychic damage and stuff. And then when you shatter them, it causes psychic damage. But its withering resistance is a little underwhelming for me. That's like one of the few things that I was like, oh, this wasn't really it for me. 3 times a day, Easterthrax fails a saving throw, can take 3d10 necrotic damage and succeed instead. It takes damage, and 3d10 is not nothing. But the other thing that I think is cool is me understanding enough about the design that they've used. I know how I would fix this immediately. If there's a gibbering mouther within 60 feet of Easterthrax, she can kill it instead of taking the damage. Boom. Amazing. She's like siphoning the psychic damage into the thing she turned into a weird monster, and it dies instead. That's great. I love that. So I literally, when I put this in my Roll20...
Sacrifice a minion, right?
Sacrifice a minion. I just added that into my stat block. And it is kind of like, I don't know if it's what the goblins do. When Matt Colville did the initial villain actions for a goblin boss, I think one of the actions he gave it was like a reaction to let it kill one of its minions instead. So I basically just took that principle and was like, oh, let's just apply that to this. If she's turned a bunch of shit into gibbering mouthers, she'll just nuke one and make the save. But a gibbering mouther's like a 60 hit point monster that's nothing to sneeze at. You know what I mean? So it's like, to me, it's more cool because it's like she's not just taking damage, which that was what I was a little underwhelmed by. Like, okay, just take some. I feel like this one was maybe like, I don't know, just didn't get cooked enough there. But again, super easy to fix. If you've looked at the rest of these, you can straight up pull some of the ideas and be like, oh yeah, I know what I would do to that. And maybe other people will say, well, that's not balanced, Pixl. You don't know, like that's...
Yeah, I was going to say, like, they might have made that decision as a balanced decision.
Yeah.
If this dragon they believed was significantly more deadly than the rest, and they're kind of throwing you a bone.
Yeah. But I also immediately was like, oh, that's what I would do with that. But other than like that one ability, everything these dragons do is cool. Another thing I will say too, a lot of these monsters have tactical stuff, right? And not just the dragons, but everything, right? The Shadow Dragon is putting areas of darkness on the field. But every single one of these dragons, if it hits you with a claw attack, can just move you 15 feet away from it. Like straight up, every dragon claw attack says they can move you 10 to 15 feet away. And that, like, pretty much, except for Xantacorajek, which can move you 20 feet away with its bite and can knock you prone with its claws. But all the rest of them just like knock you. And like, that's really cool. Like if you got hit with a dragon claw, you probably would get blasted halfway across the arena. You know what I mean? Like these things are 40 feet tall and like their claw is bigger than your entire body. If they hit you with that, you would go flying. So I think that's really cool.
Right.
And it like changes the battle. It's not like they're all just going to mob up on the dragon and beat it to death. The dragon, when it hits you, it's like whoosh, you get knocked away, right? And a lot of different abilities, monsters have abilities like that, especially the controllers, and maybe the brutes a lot of times, which I think is cool, and I think it adds like that tactical element to the fights. I haven't used most of these yet. Obviously, the book just came out, but I love them. That's so cool. I think
I've played enough war games to know that like when you start adding positioning rules, there's a lot that you can do. That's fun and satisfying, and it forces your players. Here's what I'll say about it. You can choose, depending on how you run combat, to completely ignore all of the movement stuff. Like if you're doing theater of the mind set piece style stuff, tell me what your character does, then there's a lot of this stuff that you can kind of hollow out and maintain a lot of really robust, usable content. But it gives you the opportunity to engage your players if this is the kind of thing that they really sink their teeth into. If they're those classic war game table characters.
Right. Okay, and then were there any other... So I talked about demons and dragons as two like major things, like the categories I wanted to lay in on. What else do you have that you've... Because I could talk about more. I've glanced at all of it, but those are the ones I really wanted to go in depth with.
I had one other stat block that I was extremely tickled by, and it's simply called the Yum Grub.
Oh yes, I saw that.
And
Uh,
I just want to read the whole stat block, honestly, so that everyone can revel in its glory. Um,
yeah, I gotta find that.
so
Hang on. There it is.
I'm
No,
gonna
wait.
read the description for everyone at home, and content warning if you don't like bugs, specifically as a nutritional supplement, don't listen. Now's your time to go take a break.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Yum Grub is either my favorite or second favorite monster in this book. The Yum Grub looks like an oozing apple-sized dumpling with 100 tiny legs, and they really intended to use all of those food words on purpose.
Yeah.
Like a dumpling, the insect contains a delicious secret. Their sweet flesh
God.
temporarily enhances the speed and strength of whoever consumes it. However, eating the young grub has a cost. They unleash a deeply upsetting scream when consumed, and after their magic wears off, it leaves the eater weary. So, let me get to the actual stat block of this thing. There's art for this stat block too, and it's
Yeah.
not pleasant.
I scrolled down to it earlier. I may have to put some kind of warning on the video just in case for body horror. Which also, not to derail, I want to say there's a bunch of spots. Yeah, content warning. They've done content warnings in a lot of spots
Yeah, let's
in the
mention that.
book. Um,
And there isn't one here, which I
there's one
think
here.
is
I
a
also feel
little.
like there should be, but that's okay.
There
I mean, it's
should.
not for me, but somebody might not
Well,
like this
let's
very
let's
much.
touch on that after the young grub. Let's actually
Yeah,
find one and mention it because they're really helpful. They
yeah,
offer some good advice. So the young grub is a CR0 minion, which I love the idea of minions. They are these tokens. A lot of the times they're like
yeah,
swarms or groups of
yeah. We should
things.
go more in depth on the overall minion design at some point before we get off here. But,
So this thing has a few abilities. It only has a single action, which is bite. So it's a bug. It bites. -1 to hit,
yeah,
reach of 5
and it
feet, does
is.
1 damage.
We'll talk about the minion design. The bite is a group attack, which means something. We'll talk about that when we talk about minions
Yeah,
overall.
and that's a minion thing. We'll get into that. So, Death Wail. When the young grub dies, they let out a distressing screech. Each creature within 15 feet who can hear the young grub takes 1 psychic damage. These things have 2 hit points. I'll say that. Yum grubs and creatures who have eaten a yum grub within the last minute are immune to this damage. Okay, so we're setting up a combo. They have spider climb. They can crawl all over. They're minions. We'll talk about that in depth later. And then they have a final thing called Yum. A small or larger creature can use an action to consume a living Yum grub within 5 feet of them. The Yum grub dies. And for 1 minute, the consuming creature's speed is doubled. They gain +4 to their strength score and +2 bonus to AC. When the effect ends, the creature gains 2 levels of exhaustion.
Jeez, 2 levels.
These things are insect cocaine empanadas, guys. Okay? And when you eat them, if 2 people each eat a yum grub, every other yum grub will have taken 2 points of psychic damage and will start a chain reaction of exploding, screaming yum grubs.
So actually, I think yum grubs are immune to the death whale, so they're not going to take that psychic damage.
Oh,
unfortunately.
Yum
Although you
grubs
could,
and
if you wanted
creatures
to
who have eaten
create
yum
a
grub.
chain reaction, you could edit that, and you probably would.
I would.
Yeah.
Or I would have literally some kind of explosive, something volatile.
Yeah.
That if it took just 1 little damage, something incredibly bad.
Yeah. Amazing. There's a couple
So
things
let's
that,
talk about content warnings
yeah, let's talk
after
about
this. But
content
yeah, sorry.
warnings. Is that all for the
I'll
Grub?
find one.
I actually feel like Voiceless Talkers had one, maybe. Let me
There's a
scroll down
few.
here.
A lot of the content warnings have
Oh
to
no, it wasn't.
seem to be around like body horror.
Yeah. Let's see.
Um
Maybe Gibbering Mouthers might have one. No.
or death. There's a few that are about like trauma and stuff.
Yeah.
Um
Da, 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 da. Uh,
boy oh boy.
did Bugbears get one? Actually, I can
I
just
mean, yeah, you could
search that. Can
control
I?
F.
Yep. Okay. There's one for insects and spiders in the animal section, but I don't think that's okay. Here we go. This is in elementals, and there's a content warning for blood and suffocation on
Okay.
page. It's on page 95 of the PDF. It'll be 88 of the book. Um, it describes particular stat blocks: the force of blood, the blood senescal, the essence of mist. Manipulate the blood and breath of their enemies. If you or any of your players find descriptions of blood or suffocation upsetting, you may want to avoid using these elementals or reflavor their abilities.
And that reminds me of another one I saw earlier, which was it was in regards to like a soul sucking
Yeah, that might
mosquito thing.
Sturges, yes.
Sturges.
And that's
And
interesting. That's
the
another one that like they've instead of Sturges sucking blood, they're eating like life essence and souls.
they're like consuming,
Yeah,
mana or essence,
yeah.
spirit.
Also, real
And
quick, can we just talk about how wild this Force of Blood art looks on page 101 of the PDF? Absolutely bonkers. They like the
page
blood
101.
elementals that they did are just crazy. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Oh God, it looks like classic Morrowind character decked out in Daedric, right?
Yeah, basically.
So the content warning suggested like if you have players who have an ick about this kind of like, extractive practice, that you could flavor it instead as the creature injecting venom,
Yeah.
which for someone who isn't bothered by either of those, it might be a little confusing. I want to point out that like these content warnings, if you're flipping through this book, you're probably going to be okay or prepared for a lot of the content in it. So that means when you're paying attention to these things, it's not about you. It's about other people. And so, you can scoff at it, you can brush it off, you can ignore it entirely. But I think it's a fantastic resource just to even get you thinking about how you present danger to your players and knowing what makes people feel dangerous in a way that is a challenge and not like trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another one on the Olathek, which is this like really Cthulhu thing. This kind of an original monster, I think. Because there's a lot of stuff in the book that is the same, creature that's in like Watsy's book, right? There's giants and gnolls and goblins and
Right.
hags and harpies and hellhounds and hobgoblins and purple worms and manticores and all that stuff. But then there's a couple that are like their own fully original thing. I think the Olothek is one of that. The art for which is wild, page 210. And it's very Cthulhu, tentacles and extra mouths and tongues and weird stuff. But this thing can basically like turn a person into a fish with like psychic power. Yeah, but not, and this is the body
Like an
horror thing.
aboleth.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of like their take on an aboleth, but it's not really. But it uses psychic power. This is the body horror part, right? But it as an action, it can use a power to transform a target's head, legs, or torso into fish parts, and then if it does it to all of your parts, you are permanently transformed into a hybrid fish-like creature that can only be returned to your original form by a wish or similar spell. Absolutely wild.
I love that. A big fan of turning people into fish.
And that and this art, it's like got this like weird cosmos ooze dripping off its tentacles and stuff. It's bonkers. Also their orcs are cool as hell. Can I just say that?
Oh my god, they did such a great job with theming
Yeah.
each of the groups.
There's a spot in
The
here.
orcs are kind of based on like what I imagine. I think is they drew some inspiration from Celtic culture. And the kobolds are based off of like a Roman maniple.
So cool.
Like a pre-Marian Acer triplex.
Yeah.
For all my war tactics.
I want to say it's on page 212 though. There's a picture of a bunch of orcs riding a T-Rex. It's on 219 of the PDF. The monster's called a Skiza, and it's clearly some big war mount. It's kind of, I think, a take on like the people riding the elephants in Lord of the Rings in a sense. But
I love that. Yeah. They
that's
are
so
fully riding a T-Rex. There's like a dozen people on a T-Rex.
Yeah, a dozen
so
orc
awesome.
warriors riding a T-Rex is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. I would never have thought to put that in a game ever in my life. And now I want nothing more than to do that. So,
I really love the art for the orc god caller on 209, 216 of the PDF.
Yes.
So that horn that he's holding up, this gold, dragon mouth thing, is based on a real style of war horn called a carynx. And it was used by Celtic and German troops in like, the Bronze Iron Age, whatever. And it would make a crazy sound. People have made replicas of them. You can listen to what they sound like. I encourage you to do so.
Nice. That is really cool. Also, I watched a thing about the Where Evil Lives book. We'll talk about that later as well. And they were talking a little bit about Flea Mortals because it had just come out, James Introcaso and Matt Colville. And they said there's a hidden URL somewhere in here. There's a hidden link somewhere in here that I haven't found. There's obvious links where it links to their pronunciation guide, which is really cool. You can hear people actually saying these words. But apparently there's a hidden one, and I want to know when anyone finds it. But let's see. There were a couple other things that I want to talk about. The art for mimics. There's this.
Man, so good. There's one that's a doorway.
There's one for a doorway. There's one where like the whole town is mimics, and it's just like stuff is growing.
And people are
like
running through the streets, getting snatched up.
So cool. And then there's the doorway. Very cool. And it also, this is cool. It has a thing for like a mimic companion, which I should just use for Darksbrooks from our campaign. Okay, let's talk about minions.
Yeah, minions.
So
scroll all the way up here.
Yeah, the minion design. So this is something that James Introcaso worked really hard on, I hear, at the early stages of making this book, because 4th edition had minions, and they had certain... It's very similar to that, but because of the design of 5th edition, they had some changes to it. So the purpose of minions is so that you can give your big boss monster, extra people with it, largely,
Mobs.
Right? Who you don't have to do a lot of overhead work as a DM, tracking all their hit points and all of that crap, especially at the table. That can get, if you're like not playing digitally, that can get really obnoxious to do. Minions are simple to run. The stat blocks are small and uncomplicated. They act quickly. They don't multi-attack. They don't roll for damage. That's another thing. They don't even roll for damage. They have a group attack, and you take a set number of damage for every minion participating in a group attack.
Right.
Basically, right?
So really what you're tracking, it's almost like their warfare rules.
Yeah.
Conceptually as a unit, each minion is like a casualty in this group, and the number of minions in the group makes them, because they all take actions cumulatively, it just makes that action bigger, right?
Yeah, so they have these group attacks where, if there's 5 goblin minions around the hero, then the hero's going to take, 5 of whatever the minion's damage is. And they don't have to be around one hero. They can be around multiple heroes, but then you can just roll and you can even do like group attacks and do like, I'm going to roll one time for all these minions. They hit an AC of 14. If your AC is lower than 14, tell me how many goblins are next to you right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Bonus Mom, thank you for the sub. Much appreciated. 29 months is still here. You rule. They die fast. They have like overkill rules, which is really
Oh
cool.
yeah, I
Where
love
you
that.
basically it's like the optional cleave rule in 5e, but specifically just for minions. They don't have hit dice. And so they have strength in numbers. And the thing that's really cool is like even high level monsters can have minions, right? But you just wouldn't use those minions. The idea behind minions, right? If you're a 5th level character, a single normal goblin like is whether it has 7 hit points or 1 hit point makes no
It's the
difference
same
to you.
difference.
Yeah.
It's
So
dead in one action,
it's
right?
dead in one. Like if you have a 5th level fighter, he's got a +5 to damage by that point. He is going to kill the minion if he hits it. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, even if he rolls a 1 on both dice on his greatsword, he is going to kill the minion, right? So what I think was cool is like designing. It's also that idea of like it's such a non-threat that you can cleave through a bunch of these guys, right? And they're a bunch more they're distractions. So but like if you're a 15th level character, yes, goblin minions are still nothing to you, but now fire giant minions might be nothing to you. You know what I mean? Because you're 15th level, you might be able to kill fire giants in a single round of attacks or something, or
But I like that you could still take something like a fire giant, right? Or like an orc berserker, or like some sort of like gnoll ravager minion, and they're scary, they're dangerous, but your character is tough, so making the minions gives you that like cinematic, like John Wick-esque
exactly.
clearing a room full of incredible danger because you're that much of a badass.
So, for instance, the minions. So, for the gnolls, the gnoll minion is called a gnoll mage gorger. And it has 11 hit points. So, the way the way they changed this, right, is if you hit a gnoll mage gorger and deal less than 11 damage, you didn't hit the gnoll mage gorger. Basically, it's like we don't even track.
You kill it or you don't.
You either kill it or you don't, right? If the Mage Gorger takes damage from an attack, no, it's not even that. If the Mage Gorger takes damage from an attack, or as the result of a failed saving throw, their hit points are reduced to 0. So whether you do 11 points or not, if you hit the Null Mage Gorger, which it's CR4, you wouldn't be throwing CR4 minions at your party until they're, I don't know, what, like 7th, 9th level, something like that, right? Until a CR4 creature is a complete non-issue for them, right? If you hit it at all, you just kill it, right? But if it like takes damage from a thing and makes it save, it only dies if it would have taken more than 11 damage, right? If the Mage Gorger takes damage from another effect, they die. If the damage equals to or exceeds their hit point maximum, otherwise they take no damage, right? And then their group attack is called the Wizard Ripper. Until the end of the Mage Gorger's next turn, the target has disadvantage on con saves made to maintain concentration. So these are designed to be good at killing mages for some reason. I'm sure in the lore that they've come up with for gnolls, there's some explanation for that.
They're like probably resistant to spells or some such,
Let's look at. There's bound to be a giant.
There's
Fire
giant
Giant
really
Trooper,
good
CR12 minion. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I was gonna say we could show them. There's a really good illustration of how the overkill damage works.
Oh yeah. We can
on
do that.
Page 19 of the PDF.
Yeah, we'll pop over there. So, but I just want to show you like a high level one of these guys, right? So a Fire Giant Trooper, CR12 minion. So you're only throwing Fire Giant minions at your party if they're like 15, high level, 20, 15, 20, somewhere in that ballpark. 18 armor, but only has 19 hit points.
Or maybe
right?
You're a sick puppy and you throw them at level 1 adventurers. You could do that.
I mean, you could. Although the book does expressly caution against that tactic. But anyway, but it's like if you're high enough level, right? So unarmed strike is a group attack. It's a +10 to hit, 10 feet of reach, does 3 bludgeoning damage and 3 fire damage, and you have to succeed a strength throw or fall prone. The DC for the saving throw is 12 plus the number of troopers who join the group attack. Or they have a rock group attack, plus 10 to hit. They can throw rocks for 6 bludgeoning damage, right? And it's like, if you've got a bunch of fire giants pounding on you, then like that damage is not a lot, but it adds up. But you're only using these minions if you're also throwing like another big monster at them. You know what I mean? Like this Zenith Astraca like leader, which actually specifically references the fire giant trooper. One of the her second villain action summons some fire giant troopers who are minions. So that's, one of those sort of like cross tactical things you were talking about earlier.
Right. Bringing in reinforcements, make the fight interesting.
Yeah. So they have a big section on how all these minion rules work. They're very cool. There's a really good graph illustration on page 12 of the book, 19 of the PDF, that shows you how the overkill damage would work. It's basically like spillover damage, right?
Right.
Like if I hit a goblin minion for 5 damage and the goblins have 7 hit points, then I kill 1 goblin, right? But if there's a bunch of goblins around me and I swing a greatsword and I deal 15 damage, I might kill like more goblins, right? So overkill damage illustrated. Imagine a fighter is making a melee attack with a short sword against a lackey and 2 more lackeys are within overkill range of that attack, which is basically the range of the attack. Each lackey is a minion with 6 hit points. In example A, the attack hits and deals 4 piercing damage. This kills only the targeted lackey. A successful attack against a minion always kills the target. In example B, the attack is a critical hit and deals 13 piercing damage. This kills the targeted lackey with 7 overkill damage remaining, which spreads to the other minions within the fighter's overkill range. So a secondary lackey within 5 feet of the fighter takes 6 piercing damage and dies, leaving 1 overkill damage remaining. The third lackey takes that last point of overkill damage and dies.
I love that.
So, yeah, so if you're overkill, like the last monster whose hit points are not fully depleted by the math dies. And then the next one takes no damage and lives, right? So that would give you the illusion of we're cleaving through massive, swaths of enemies. We're cutting a swath, right?
I like their solution to this, right? They explain their rationale behind it in like it scales really well in that you give them like a hit point pool, like a cap for the overkill. Because that's really the only point that matters. That number only matters when you're trying to figure out overkill. Because doing damage to any of these things at all puts them down.
Right.
But giving them that sort of like one hit down, but if it's a big hit, you can cut through a bunch of them.
Right.
And to make it so that like a goblin might have, let's say a goblin minion, low level adventure, let's say it has 2 hit points as your overkill cap. Maybe you kill 2 in 1 hit, 3 for some of your tough characters or on a crit.
Well, you can get so let's look at it. Unless you edit it, Goblin Lackey, the minion stat block they give us, has 6 hit points.
And then you'd have something like the Fire Giant minion, which has what, like 11, I think you
18?
said? 18?
Maybe?
So like, to take an example from our current AOA actual play that I'm in, Region of Badagar, a character like Solomon who can dish out like
50 damage in a round,
let's say he does 40 damage on 1 greatsword attack. He could take out 3 fire giant minions if he was surrounded, and that makes sense. It's the Frostbrand greatsword,
right? It's Frostbrand greatsword. If he crits and he does like a 3rd level smite and all the smite damage crits, like he's done upwards of and 60 damage in a single hit before. It's bonkers. Yeah. He's basically doing he's basically doing a Cloud Strife limit break at that point.
Yeah.
He's Omni slashing the shit out of a fire giant. Yeah. So the minion stuff is really cool. I also wanted to talk about in their new rules, they've added a new condition, Dazed, which is kind of like it's like it's like a weaker version of Stunned, because stunning characters sucks.
It's real dangerous.
It's miserable, right? There's I don't know if those of you who know probably can tell from the shirt that I watch a lot of Dimension 20. There's a part in season 2 of Unsleeping City where one of their major melee characters gets hit with an intelligence saving throw stunning condition and has to roll like a 19 on the die to make that save, and straight up doesn't make it for like 5 or 6 rounds of a fight. Her character's just sitting there going like, oh, blah, 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 I'm drooling, you know. It's horrible. Yeah. And like it would be miserable to experience as a player and not really that fun as a GM. So the dazed condition is basically like, instead of being completely unable to do anything, you can only do one of the following: move, use an action, or a bonus action. If you become dazed during your turn ends, which is like if something has a reaction that dazes you, then your turn's over. Tells you what removes it, which is basically lesser restoration or something similar. When a dazed creature is affected by a spell or effect that gives them an extra action on their turn, like haste or action surge, you can still take that extra action in addition to whatever you can do with dazed. Some creatures in the book have immunity to dazed at the GM's discretion. A creature published in the core rules or another substance supplement who has immunity to paralyzed or stunned can also have immunity to dazed. But I think that's excellent design, where it's like, yeah, it like limits what you can do, you know. And you can imagine what the dazed condition would be. Oh, you got hit on the head really hard and you're kind of like seeing stars, but you're not completely out of it, but you're certainly not operating at your highest capacity. It's like a step in between stunned. I would honestly, 9 times out of 10, take any stunned condition in the core rules that exists and just swap it for dazed. All the monks will hate me, but, you know, I would flat out just stop using stun and add in dazed, because it's like I would much rather have my boss monster get dazed than stunned, because they can still do a little bit, but it still massively limits what they can do. But, you know, I really wouldn't probably monkey with that in a party where I actually had someone playing a monk. But, you know, I just think it's better than the stun condition.
It fixes the problem of when you put a negative consequence on a player's character in a combat encounter, and especially those little debuffs, very small debuffs, can have enormous consequences that, because of how they set you up for additional failure. It's the death spiral, right?
Yeah.
And dazed, the stunned, incapacitated, dazed, paralyzed conditions, they screw with your action economy.
Yeah.
And that is the most powerful thing that you as a character have over most monsters, is that you can do more stuff to them.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that stuff, you are vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's like, think about the experience of being stunned, right? Like, you know, as the GM, we're juggling a bunch of stuff. We're adjudicating everything the players are throwing at us. If you're a player and you have 5 or 6 people at your table and we're running anything above 5th level PCs, people's turns take some amount of time to adjudicate, right? Sometimes it's just a couple seconds. Sometimes it can be upwards of a minute if we got to look shit up, right? So, you know, sometimes it can take, I don't know, 15 minutes to get around the table for a single round of combat, maybe, or something, right?
Sometimes longer.
And if I'm stunned and I'm in a condition that doesn't end my stun until I save or something like that, right? And it's a save I'm not likely to make
for 15, 20
minutes.
and
it's like, and then you imagine, okay, we go, I get stunned, I'm, you know, and then maybe the first round, the bad guy goes right before me. He goes right before me. I'm stunned. I lose my next turn. I save at the end of my turn. I fail the save. Okay, 15 minutes goes all the way around. Everyone else gets to do all their cool stuff. I get to sit there and watch. We come back to me, and I just fail the save again. And then we go around again. You know, it's like, so even if you've sat there for 2 rounds of being stunned, that's like, could be as much as, you know, half an hour or more of actual real time that you're just not participating in the fun game we're all playing. Miserable. Absolutely miserable.
In a 3-hour game, that's like 15, 20% of your time at the table.
Versus dazed, where now it's like, okay, I can do one thing. I only can move. Right. I can either move, attack, or bonus action. But
or you can say, guess what? I'm going to do these things that give me extra actions, so that I can compensate.
Of course,
it's like
Yeah.
a resource management thing. I
Exactly.
like that. It's a
But then
yeah.
it also becomes not that I'm sitting here totally checked out, but all of a sudden I'm looking for like, what's the best opportunity I can do with the one thing I can do this turn? Is it best for me to just get out of the dodge and be somewhere away from the fray
Right,
until I can
right.
get in
Instead of
this
having nothing
condition?
to do.
Is it that I make my one attack and hopefully, if we're close to the end of the fight, maybe the best thing I can do is just take my attack. Or, maybe there's a bonus action and I'm gonna, Misty Step somewhere or something, right? Um, so yeah, so that's definitely like one of the things I thought was great in the book was adding this day's condition. Um, you know, I think is a great middle ground where you're not just completely taking a player out and making sure that they can't, they're just sitting there dead in the water and bored. Um, okay, well, we're a little over an hour here. I feel like we've said a lot of the stuff. I do want to briefly maybe touch on the environment and villain parties sections. There's
Yeah, yeah,
also
yeah.
some rules for psionic powers that I haven't really looked at. I'm going to be honest with you. Um,
Oh yeah, that's like the very last section of
yeah,
the book.
they're coming out with an updated version of a class that they made called the Talent, which is basically a purely psionic class. But until I get my hands on that, I'm not really going to pay much attention to the psionic stuff. So let's talk about the environments because I think you really liked this. And I have looked at the villain parties, but I haven't looked at everybody's stat blocks. Um, so yeah, environments. It's basically a section of the book where they give you, different things. We've got cave, enchanted forest, graveyard, tomb, road, ruined keep, sewer, swamp, and underground. So a bunch of the common places where you might have adventures, and then they give you some like layer action stuff and like some really specific monsters that you might find only in those kinds of a place, um, which is really cool.
Oh no.
And they're very much flavored for only the spot. So I'm looking at one here, like the Ruined Keep has a thing called the Lacuna, which
Yes.
it feeds on the grief of abandoned places. They're like a fiend. That
It's like a
statue
fake
thing.
statue kind
Yeah.
of a thing, right? I
And
like that one.
it's got like false. It's kind of like a mimic, but it's a demon, and it lives in abandoned keeps. Like it's just very evocative and cool. I can see myself really enjoying using that. Grief Eater seems like a very cool attack. They are nasty. They're CR 15. Um, Infuse Sadness, and the names of the stuff in this book are just amazing too. Um, I would love to infuse sadness my enemies. I don't even know what it does, but I'm already excited. So the environment section is really cool. It combines like specific monsters that you would only find in a place like that. It gives you a map, like a pretty simple key,
Yeah.
battle map of an
E-
area like that.
Each of these sections is like a one-stop shop. If you had to throw together like a random one shot with a fight, like with a combat
Yeah.
encounter, each and every one of these sections, you could just with a tiny bit of prep, you could throw down and be like, these are the monsters they're gonna fight. They're gonna explore this place. I have some flavor text. I just have to have a reason.
Right. Um, and I think since we're talking about it, one of the offshoots of this was they are putting out another book that is kind of like a companion to this called Where Evil
Where
Lives.
evil lives.
There is a PDF of it, a PDF of like the preview. Basically, it has two full layers in it. One is a low level goblin layer that I actually would love to run. It's like a second level thing. I might run that later this month. Did I? No, that's yeah. I might run. Well, that's like second level characters. Anyway, that it basically they're hideaways for they're like for the named monsters in Flea Mortals. So it basically gives you like, hey, if you like, we gave you this goblin monster. What's her name? Queen Bargarot or something is like the
Yeah,
leader.
Bargrut
Uh,
or Bagrut.
Bargnot. That's it. Queen Bargnot is the Goblin
Bargnot.
Queen.
So close.
And she has villain actions and all of this different stuff. And then this book is going to have the Jagged Edge Hideaway, which is a nice low-level dungeon full of goblins. With multiple encounters. They give you a map. Here's the map, right? Jagged Edge Hideaway. And it's really cool. I think they've put a lot of thought into this thing. Basically, there are these like holes that go up to a road. The thing is underneath of a road, and then there's these holes on the side of the road that they climb up out of and attack people. They have like a war spider that they use, and it has its own lair in the back, kind of behind a secret door. And so it's got a few rooms, and like you can run a 1 or 2 shot adventure of these goblins. It's very similar to the Impregnable Fortress of Dib in a way. I think of the goblins who have tunneled under the road and are attacking people. Impregnable Fortress of Dib is I want to say it's like a Kobold Press adventure from a little one-shot book that I have that I've run several times. Unrelated. Anyway. And then they also, the thing has the Terminal Excrescence, which is a layer of voiceless talkers, which are the MCDM mind flayers. I would actually love to run both of these at some point, just to kind of test them out and see what they are. But they're going to be releasing Where Evil Lives. If you've backed Flea Mortals, you get Where Evil Lives for free in PDF. And then you can buy the hardcover if you want. They're doing it's not a Kickstarter, it's a backer kit, which is like another crowdfunding platform for it right now. But I'm going to get it in PDF because I already have this one. So, but they're going to have like 22 layers in the thing, which is super duper cool. Absolutely love that. Because it's another thing that like I find trouble, especially like as someone who runs online all the time. When I buy an official like Wizards adventure, they give me everything and the dynamic lighting is done and there's battle maps. And like, yes, I'm working with pre-designed content, which I would love to be doing more homebrew stuff. But for me, the process of making good looking online, like Roll20 stuff is a nightmare. Like that adds like 2 to 3 hours of prep where I'm fucking around in Incarnate trying to make a good battle map or whatever. Or I have to go find something and then I have to find out if I can use it. And it's a whole big thing. Like I don't want to just pull random maps off the internet. Like if in my home game, I would absolutely do that. I just go pull a map from somewhere and great, this looks great. But like if I'm streaming it, I don't want to be, doing intellectual property theft. Like that's awful. And I don't have time to figure out what every map maker's like rules are for how people can use their stuff. So having something that's like designed where like, here, we're going to give you all these VTTs, we'll give you like all the stuff. And then even if I don't use their layer design, like with all the monsters, the way they put them in there, if I want to change stuff for how I'm running it, it's still just having those assets.
Yeah, you have all the pieces, parts.
Yeah.
You can shuffle them around.
And especially stuff like you can find a million like goblin caves online, but if you start getting some of the more esoteric stuff, I especially feel like I have trouble with dragon layers. If I'm looking for like a good dragon layer that does what I need it to do, it's hard to find, man. And so that's something I'm pretty excited to see when that comes out. As kind of a companion to this. Also, that book will have all of the necessary stat blocks to run stuff in it. So, like, if you already have Flea Mortals, some of the stuff that's going to be in Where Evil Lives is the stat blocks you already have. But I wouldn't worry about that too much. That's just that if someone wants to buy it as a standalone and just use it, they don't have to also buy the other book. So
smart.
Okay. Well, we're at about 90 minutes in. We've been talking pretty extensively here. The last little section, there's one on villain parties. I like these as an idea.
I feel like this needs a lot of time to figure out. This is a new kind of idea. And I toyed with this a little bit in my last campaign that I ran for Beast Wilds.
Yeah, and this is something I wanted to do something like this in the last home game I ran for you guys, and I just never could get it together to pull it off. I like even made the characters, right? Because like running a whole opposite party of things that are pretty much like PCs,
it's tough because you want them to be strong enough. First of all, they have to have an individual identity, right? So there's a lot of setup that goes into that.
I got to figure out how to role play 5 different people. Yeah.
Right. You have to remember, and you have to be able to switch between them
Yep. Because
if
they're
they're
all
all
going to show
fighting
up at the same
together.
time.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure on us guys. And then you have to run all of their stat blocks.
Yeah.
Like
So I
these,
would be interested. I'm not sure how, like, I
you
feel
know
like
what I
these
think
are
this is good
are
for?
decent, like the grave order here, like that stat block for this person doesn't look too complicated, right? An aura of command, like two features, a multi attack, two types of attacks, and a reaction. That's very similar to like all the other design in this book.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm hopeful. I'd have to look at this more carefully. I will say the art for all of them is cool as shit. What was the other thing you
It's
were gonna
just
say?
they nailed it. Oh, I was gonna say uh one thing that occurred to me when I saw this villain parties thing
Yeah,
was this is an excellent way to include uh folks in your table during session who aren't either normally part of the game, or maybe this is a way that you can include them in the game without them having to be a regular PC if they show up as a villain.
yeah,
So these are like, in my mind, I think of these villain groups, these villain gangs as uh like um a way that you can bring on like an extra DM. You can expand your non-player cast using these.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities for that.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, I didn't think of that at all. Um, yeah, so that's something I want to explore more because it's a good idea. Like it's something that has occurred, I think, to a lot of DMs, right? To look at running like a rival group or having the main bad guy be a whole party of villains. But it is a lot of work to put together, and it seems like they have put a lot of good work into this, right? So looking at these guys, it's like, who are these people? The Grave Order, optimized for third level characters, great. Um, what's their deal? What's their background? What are their goals? What are their methods? Let's talk about each one of these people, and like handing you that is uh super helpful. You know what I mean? As a GM, like that I'm not coming up with like all of this on my own for five different villains. Like most of us, so maybe some of us had that amount of time, but a lot of us don't, right? And if it's not something that comes super easy to you, or you get stuck on that kind of like world building, and you can always take these things and monkey with them. Um, cool. Any like final things that we want to talk about?
Um, I guess I want to ask you how you think this is going to affect your games. Like
Yeah,
how do you see this as a tool fitting into your future as a DM?
sure. So, I know they're coming out with a Roll20 version at some point, but one doesn't currently exist. So I've gone through, and this is like an angular way to answer the question. I've gone through and input everything from A through D into my Roll20. They also gave, I will say, again, I keep getting asides here. They did give us um, maps and tokens. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
can digitally, you don't have to pull them out of the book, which I started doing that because I didn't realize they had given them to us to begin with. But they straight up give you a big zip file with pretty much all of the art that is relevant in token form already, which is rad as hell. So I've been manually inputting all
Thank you,
this stuff, which
MCDM.
is good because I'm learning the blocks as I do it. It's going to take a bunch of time. I honestly foresee myself straight up replacing as many of WotC's monsters with these as I possibly can while I'm running. Like as I start to run Curse of Strahd, right? For instance, I'm gonna go to this thing's undead and just start swapping in and see what happens. When Curse of Strahd says use a zombie, I'm gonna look at what kind of zombies these guys give us and see what how if I can just straight up swap them out. And that's where I'm going to start. I don't know, because I tend to run like canned adventures for stream because it's just like timing wise easier for me to do so because it's like a lot less overhead. I don't know that I'm going to be like building a lot of adventures specifically around any of these things yet. I'm going to be trying to swap these things into currently existing stuff that I'm trying to run just to see how that goes. But I'm excited. I think I'm going to try, anything that I can swap out from the monster manual for one of these that I'm currently using, I'm going to try it and see what my experience is like, basically, once I get them input into the system anyway.
Can't wait.
So, that's, we don't have much time left in Region of Bedegar, so I may not get to any of those things, because you basically just have, like, the climax of the campaign left. But Curse of Strahd, definitely. And then whatever I run after this, if it's another 5e thing, yeah, I'll probably swap some of these things in. So, what about you? Any, I know you tend to like homebrew all your own stuff, and you also haven't been running as much lately due to other, just work and things. Do you think this is going to have any, you're going to like browse through it for inspiration, or you just, like that it exists? Uh-oh, I think I lost him. Oh, no. Well, I guess we're not going to get his final thoughts. His internet does that sometimes. Oh, I don't have my face cam up. All right, guys. Unfortunately, we've lost Beast. So I do want to say to everybody who's been hanging out, thank you so much. And if you're new to the channel and you don't know us, you haven't seen us before, we are Ages of Ainor. Okay, I'm gonna have to fix my face cam here. Bloop. 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 Nope, that's not it. Got a little flicker. No. I want the Zoom meeting. Just be the whole screen, please. Stand by, everyone. This is super annoying. Okay. Pardon me while I just... Okay, there we go. Good enough. All right, everybody. So if you're new to the channel, if you're seeing this, we're going to put this on YouTube. If you're seeing this on YouTube, first thing I want to say, we are Ages of Ainor. Thank you for coming and hanging out. A couple of things to note. In the doobly-doo down below, we have a Discord link where we have a community of GMs and players of D&D. If you want to come, play some of these games, talk about some of this stuff. I run one-shots in there. I also do stream games every... Oh, I can readmit him to the Zoom? Okay, hang on. I can't readmit him to the Zoom. Okay. Anyway, sorry, guys. We are Ages of Ainor. We run games on stream here at twitch.tv/Ages of Ainor. If you're seeing this on YouTube, that link will be in our link tree below as well. Currently running 2 different campaigns. We're running Curse of Strahd, and we are actually running, we're wrapping up the Region of Bedegar. We have previously run the Siege of Castle Rend. We've been trying to incorporate those rules as well. So if you want to see some actual play content of the MCDM 2 previous kind of books that they've done, check out that playlist. It's called Adventures in Bedegar, and it has both our what am I trying to say? It has both of our both of the campaigns, Siege of Castle Rand and Bedegar, although we have individual playlists for both. And then we also have a Discord, as I said, where we do host kind of like open games. People can join. Currently, there's a bunch of campaigns going on in there. We're always looking for new DMs and new players. Currently need more DMs than players, as always. That's just kind of how it goes. So if you're someone who's willing to DM and wants to find some folks to play with, come check out our Discord. Cool. So that's everything that we've got, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on the book, anything that you wish was done differently. My final takeaways, I'm going to be replacing any monster that I can in any of the games I'm running with a monster from this book. and seeing how that goes. My top line takeaway again, like I said up top, is I didn't find anything in this book that I thought WotC did a better job with. Straight up, it's great. The art is amazing. The design is really, really good. And I'm going to be using these all over the place, I think. And I hope it's going to make my game better and more fun. And I think that it will. So thank you guys, and peace.
Let me tell a tale of a world where heroes walk among us, fighting through the darkness left by monsters and by selfish men. A tale of glory rent asunder.